Shabbat Shalom. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another Shabbat lesson. But before I get started, as always, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakah HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well, in whom I learned this truth from. In peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. Shabbat Shalom. And I'm going to get straight into it with Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And when we go into the Strong's definition for that word iniquity, it's G458, anomia. And in the outline of biblical usage, it says the condition of without law because ignorant of it, because of violating it, contempt and violation of law, iniquity, wickedness. So pretty much, because lawlessness shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And this is ultimately talking about this world not being governed by the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai in the scriptures. But it can be also talking about these different laws in these different societies being ignored and not being enforced. And with people seeing that being the case out here, they're running buck wild out here, committing all acts of crime and violence and all that without any repercussions. And that's what I'll be dealing with in this video. I'm going to be going into two articles showing just the love of many waxing cold out here on the streets of America due to iniquity or lawlessness abounding. Because what have we seen over these past couple of years in the wake of George Floyd's death, in the George Floyd riots and protests? You saw calls for defunding the police, and police stations across the country have been defunded, and a lot of cops have been leaving the force as well due to just the negative backlash they get for doing their job, and just a bunch of new rules and regulations which further keep them from enforcing the laws they want to. And then, of course, the C-19 mandates to get the jump shot caused a lot of cops to leave the force. And with that being the case, you've got less cops on the streets patrolling, and these people out here seeing that. And then they're talking about it in the news, which is just further making people more bold out here and going committing acts of crime and not seeing any repercussions for it. And this is only going to continue as we get closer and closer to Jacob's trouble and all hell breaking loose out here. Expect to see more robberies, kidnappings, murders, grapes, and all that. And this is all the vengeance of the Lord coming upon the people on this planet for all the wickedness they've been committing. But the first article I'll be going to is on endoftheamericandream.com, and the title reads, "Violent crime has become a hot political issue this election season. Perhaps that is because there is blood all over the streets. Because iniquity, lawlessness shall abound, the love of many waxes cold." And then on January, either the 1st or the 3rd of 2023, up in Illinois, they're going to get rid of, I believe it's the cash bond system, which means that people held in jails for particular crimes, they're going to be let out for them. And some of those crimes include second-degree murder, kidnapping, and I think burglary, and threats of violence towards political figures. It's pretty much everything under the sun. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things are going to look up in Illinois come 2023 with even more iniquity abounding. And stuff like that's going to spread to the rest of the country. Just complete lawlessness out here and crime and anarchy. Millions upon millions of Americans are starting to realize that we simply cannot continue down the path that we are currently on. Communities all over the nation are degenerating into crime-infested hellholes, and a lot of us have decided that enough is enough. We don't want to raise our families in cities that resemble war zones. We don't want to walk on city streets that are soaked in blood. Unfortunately, Just electing new politicians won't stop the rising tide of violence. The truth is that social decay is systematically eating away at the foundations of our culture, and that is not such an easy thing to fix. And nothing will be fixed, nothing can be fixed, because we're not living in the times of peace and security and this society continuing on. We're living in the times of death and destruction and judgment, and this society coming to an end. And it's imperative that you understand these scriptures so you can be able to read the signs of the times and know exactly what times you're living in. The times of great judgment, the times of Jacob's trouble, the times of the Most High, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, visiting the world for the iniquity people have been committing on it. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm going to start at verse 1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. And when we go into these articles, think to yourself, what times are we living in? Are we living in the times of peace and healing? Are we living in the times of hate and killing, the times of war? Are we living in the times of weeping or the times of laughing? A time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time of love and a time of hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And besides the information we're going to read about in these articles, just look at the world around you. Talks of World War III, nuclear war, famines and food shortages, pestilences, inflation and hyperinflation, a dark winter, economic collapses, recessions and great depressions. Does this sound like we live in the good times, the times of embracing and laughing and peace and love? Of course not. We're living in the exact opposite times. So again, no matter what anybody tries to do, these politicians or these different groups out here to try to make things better, they can't stop biblical prophecy from coming to its fulfillment. And what biblical prophecy is calling for in these last days is the times of death, destruction, war, and judgment. Survey after survey has shown that violent crime is one of the hottest political issues in America right now. In fact, a recent Gallup survey discovered that a whopping 72% of Americans are dissatisfied with the nation's policies to reduce or control crime. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you've had the defunding of the police, a lot of police leaving the force due to a whole host of issues, and even more laws being taken out of place and crimes being decriminalized, making a much more lawless and chaotic situation for people out here. Slovakia. A Gallup poll from earlier this year found 72% of Americans were dissatisfied with the nation's policies to reduce or control crime. Other polls, including a survey by Monmouth University released this month, have found voters see crime among the most important issues ahead of the 2022 midterms. In September alone, Republican campaigns and groups spent $39.8 million on 157 unique ads focused on crime. According to ad tracker Ad Impact, Democratic campaigns and groups, mostly in response to the Republican attacks, spent $32.9 million on 119 distinct ads on the issue, a significant increase from the amount these groups were spending on the issue in August. This isn't a fake issue. There really is blood all over our streets, and some of our largest cities are reporting numbers that are absolutely eye-popping in 2022. For example, the city of New Orleans, down here, says that the number of murders in the city this year has already surpassed the totals from 2020 and 2021. And last I heard, New Orleans has gotten back its top spot of being the murder capital of the country, like back in the 90s. And there's an app I use, which I would recommend you sincere Akim and Akwat out there download, called Newsbreak, which gives you a bunch of different news information from a bunch of different sources. You can go to worldwide news or local news. And when you go to local news down here, there's carjackings and murders and stick-ups and shootings damn near every day down here. Just the other night, there were 3 different instances of robbery. There was one guy who went to meet a chick at her house, and when he went to meet her there, she was there at the house, but 2 other guys were with her, and they robbed this dude, took his money, took his keys, and took his car and hauled ass. And then another guy got carjacked and shot. And then there was a woman who also got robbed, and when the guy put the gun on her to get her money from her, the article said she threw her credit card at him, and he took the credit card, but he also grabbed her head and slammed it against the door of her car and ran off. And then there was another instance where you had a Jake in the downtown area around here who was just randomly stabbing people. Like, he'd go ask people for money or a drink, and if they didn't give it to him, he jugged them up. And then you had another guy get into an altercation with a woman down here, and he pulled out a machete and started attacking her and attacked the guy who tried to intervene and stop it. It's pretty chaotic down here in New Orleans, and it's only going to get worse. It's down here and in the rest of the country. And even down here, they're having an issue with hiring more police onto the force. You've got a lot that may go to the academy, but then they drop out and don't graduate. And then it's getting so bad down here that they're having to put programs in place to deputize citizens out here to go handle particular issues. And one guy who was deputized, he was like a constable or something in the East, which is, if you live down in New Orleans, you know how bad the East is. It's the Wild West. He went with a landlord to go issue a citation to somebody who wasn't paying their rent. He got shot and the landlord got shot. Just complete pandemonium down here. And what's crazy is where I live, just places that I go to or have gone to regularly, crimes and robberies and shootings take place. And it's crazy because I may have just been there maybe a week ago or a month ago, and then you hear a cop is off duty, sitting in a parking lot by this bar, and then some people come and stick him up and shoot him and rob him. It's ridiculous out here. For example, the city of New Orleans says that the number of murders in the city this year has already surpassed the totals from both 2020 and 2021. In the first 9 months of the year, the city has already surpassed the total number of homicides from each of the last 2 years, according to the Metropolitan Crime Commission. The number of homicides was surpassed on Sunday, October 2nd, with 220 reported homicides in 2022. This is 2 more than last year, which had a total of 218 homicides, and 19 more than in 2020, which had 201 homicides. Along with the increase in violent crime, armed robberies are outpacing all other violent crimes with a year-to-date total of 417, and they are occurring at an increased rate in every single NOPD district, according to New Orleans Crime Bulletin. And also, When you think of crime and criminals in New Orleans, what do you think of? Jake attacking and robbing other Jakes. But hey, these younger Jakes out here are getting real bold. They've got places outside of New Orleans called Metairie and Kenner, and these are places where nice to do places, so to speak, where you would see Edomites. And Jake is starting to move into those areas and start robbing places, breaking into places, and stealing money. They got a strip down here called Veterans in Metairie, and they had a bunch of Jakes just hit up a few stores along Veterans and break in and steal money. And that's something that would have been unheard of a couple of years ago, because again, that's the nice areas where Esau dwells. They got another area called Lakeview, which is in New Orleans, but it's on the lake. So that's where really well-to-do Edomites live at. And there have been house burglaries there by Audubon Park, by Loyola, which is a really nice college down here. You had a carjacking. And then in Kenner, by a place called the Treasure Chest Casino on the boat launch, you had two Jakes go up and rob some people there. So no place is literally safe out here anymore. When you go out, you're literally taking your life into your own hands. You won't know if you get into an altercation and get in a fight with somebody and they shoot or stab you. You get carjacked, robbed, or anything. So we truly do need Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai in these terrible times we're coming into. Like I was talking about in my lesson that I did yesterday, hey, the Most High is going to be our shield and sword in these days to come, because you may be very proficient with guns. You may have a bunch of guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. You may be a MMA fighter, a boxer, anything like that. But if you don't have that protective hedge of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai over you, you're not making it through these calamities of Jacob's trouble, which are in the process of taking place as we speak. Our culture has become a culture of violence, and way too many people are needlessly dying. In particular, it should deeply sadden all of us when the life of a young person is senselessly ended for no reason at all. But as it says in Job chapter 4, whoever perished being innocent. Any horrific deaths or occurrences that happen to people out here are all ultimately the judgments of the Most High on that person for wickedness they've either committed in this life or in a past life. Earlier this month, the murder of an 18-year-old football star in Georgia made headlines all over the country. The girlfriend of a murdered high school football star says his final word was help, said as he died in a pool of blood after being shot outside a Georgia mall. Bailey Reedling, 20 years old, says she searched for a pulse in vain after her boyfriend, Elijah DeWitt, was gunned down outside Sugarloaf Mills Mall in Lawrenceville on October 5th. She told Fox News, "I run over to Elijah and he's on the ground and I go right over to him and he mouths to me. The last word he said to me was help. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many is waxing cold." He could have had such a bright future ahead of him, but now he is gone. And when you're dealing in the spirit, hey, if you're not of the elect of the nation of Israel, I'm just going to cut it straight with you. Hey, this guy got out lucky. And anybody that passes away before Jacob's trouble really kicks off is the Most High having mercy on you. Because things may seem like they're bad now, but when Jacob's trouble takes place, it's going to be on a whole different level. It's going to be times like have never been seen ever before in human history. Worse than the flood during the days of Noah. Worse than 70 AD, the transatlantic slave trade, World War I, World War II. Any horrific instance in history that can come to your mind won't hold a candle to Jacob's trouble. And that's exactly what the scriptures say. This is Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people. Jacob's trouble is going to be so bad that the archangel Michael is going to have to stand up and help in defending the elect get through these calamities. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone that shall be found written in the book, the elect of the nation of Israel, who are diligently doing whatever they can right now to stay in the good graces of their power, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, so they can hope to have this protective hedge over them. But as for everybody else out here, the wicked of our people, you hard-headed and rebellious so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans who don't want to return back to your power, and these heathens out here in general, you're about to go through this time like no other, but you won't have that protection over you, and you're going to get it every which way but loose. This is Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. That he being them that are written in the book of life, the elect of the nation of Israel. If it seems to you that crime is getting a lot worse in our major cities, that is because it is. In fact, a former governor of New York says that he has never felt more unsafe walking the streets of New York City than he does right now. New York's former Democrat governor, David Paterson, says he has never felt more unsafe in New York City than now, adding that his party has a blind spot when it comes to crime. And New York City is looking like a Grand Theft Auto right about now. I saw one clip of these guys chasing down this woman in an SUV. I think they might have been in a Dodge Charger. They were chasing her down like out of a Grand Theft Auto. They hit her on the back, they hit her on the side, and her car skid. And then she threw out whatever they wanted to take. They grabbed her shit, got back in their car, and sped off. Patterson said on the Cat's Roundtable with John Katzimatidis radio show Sunday that crime is still a top issue for New Yorkers in the 2022 midterm election cycle, and he hoped that candidates would take notice. For the first time in my life, even in the late 80s and 90s, when the crime rate was killing 2,000 people a year, I never felt as unsafe as I do now just walking around. And God forbid, sometimes we take the subway home from WABC, and you're hearing about an assault on the subway almost every other day, Patterson said. And does this sound like a time to embrace and a time of love and peace? No. Sounds like a time of hate and killing and violence. And hey, there've been a lot of stories coming out on those attacks taking place on the subway systems up there. I can't remember if it was in New York or New Jersey. I'm not too familiar with how things are up there. But there was a woman who a man had asked her if he could get her number, if she wanted to go on a date, and she turned him down. She had a husband. But you see on the little CCTV cameras that they had in the little subway station, the man ran up to her, punched her, knocked her on the ground, was kicking her, hitting her in the face and all that. And when they had an interview with her, she was all busted up looking and said, I'd never felt so much fear in my entire life. And as the situation continues to deteriorate out here, that's just going to be even more of a common occurrence taking place. And a lot of bad things are coming to you women out here. We're coming into the times when Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is really going to judge you for the wickedness and the madness you've been committing, especially the women of the tribes, you so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American women. You know that things are bad when even prominent Democrats are talking like this. But violent crime is not just a problem in our urban areas. Can you guess which state has the highest rate of violent crime? It isn't New York. It isn't California. If you can believe it, the prize actually goes to Alaska. Alaska topped the list with 837.8 violent crimes committed per 100,000 people, according to a breakdown of FBI data from the 2020 on rates for murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, and assault across the U.S. It was followed by New Mexico with 778.2 violent crimes per 100,000 people, then Tennessee with 672.7 violent crimes per 100,000 people, all well above the national average of 398.5 crimes for every 100,000 people. It isn't just one segment of our society that is deeply sick. The truth is that much of the population has openly embraced violence. In fact, survey after survey has found that about 2/3 of all Americans now support the legalized murder of unborn children. Again, because iniquity or lawlessness shall abound, the love of many will wax cold. We are truly a nation that is very advanced, in a very advanced state of societal decline. Our communities are absolutely teeming with sickos, degenerates, and predators, and this is true even in our smallest towns. For example, a woman that was being kept as a sex slave recently made a miraculous escape from the home of a 39-year-old man in the small town of Excelsior Springs, Missouri. And like I just said, hey, you women are especially about to start having a lot of judgments coming your way. And it's already starting to happen with this example we're about to read, and a lot of instances of human sex trafficking going on out here with women getting kidnapped. I did a video a couple of weeks ago showing how one woman went to her car and she saw that there was a rag in the car door, and she didn't think anything of it and took the rag out, but the rag had something on it that made her dizzy, almost on the verge of passing out. And she was lucky that her husband was with her, because, hey, she would have passed out and no man was with her. They'd have thrown her in the back of a van somewhere. And in the same video, there was a man who saw on his teenage daughter's car, on the back door handle, a black zip tie. He would see it just about every morning and, cut it off. And then he was asking one of his friends on the police force about it. And his friend said, hey, cut that shit off, because that's what human traffickers put on a car to mark a target. A lot more women are going to start getting kidnapped out here, get raped and murdered. Now let's go to back to the scriptures, which just goes to show the terrible times you women are about to go through for all the wickedness you've been committing out here. Adultery, putting men on child support, getting men unlawfully arrested and sent to prison, lying, cheating, stealing, just all this wickedness you've been committed, that this society under Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, has afforded you the liberties to do under this feministic, gynocentric society. All that shit's coming to an end. This is Isaiah chapter 32, verse 9. Rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech. You women out here are especially at ease and careless out here. And just look at how you operate out here. You'll be driving. You won't even put on a turn signal. Or if you do, you'll just assume that because you put on that turn signal, you can just pull out in front of somebody. You go out on the weekends or whenever, you go downtown or clubs and shit like that, dressed in skimpy dresses, and you get drunk and take drugs and think nothing's gonna happen to you. And then when somebody does take you and yoke you up, you're crying, oh, this is bad. Why did this happen? How could this happen to me? When you put yourself in that bad situation. Hey, a lot of you women out there, and I'm speaking to the women of the tribes, so-called Negro, Latino, Native American women. You better wisen up, because the times of the playtime is almost over, and it's about to be life or death out here. We're already seeing instances of women being put in life and death situations. Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, and the gathering shall not come. And that vintage is talking about all these different goodies and services you've been afforded in society. Section 8, SNAP, all these government programs that help out women, being able to get a job over a man, being able to call 911 over any little thing. All these things are going to be taken away, and you're only going to be left in that day to defend for yourself, because you've burnt a lot of bridges with a lot of men out here, so you won't have anybody to turn to or lean unto. And in a lot of instances, those men you screwed over, as lawlessness continues to take hold of this society, they're going to come directly after you and get their payback. Tremble, ye women that are at ease, be troubled, ye careless ones. Strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins. Being in a mournful spirit out here, being humbled out here, because you no longer got any of these benefits or protections in society, and everybody's coming after your ass. And we're truly going to see if men and women are equal in the times of Jacob's trouble, and that a woman can do bad all by herself and fight off a man, like the Black Widow or Atomic Blonde or any of these other bullshit movie characters they got out here. They shall lament for the teats, for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. Hey, missing all those goodies and protections that are no longer available to them. A terrified woman with a dog collar soldered to her neck fled a dilapidated home where she'd been held captive for around a month, and told shaken neighbors she'd been kept as a sex slave. The woman fled the home of 39-year-old Tim Hazlitt in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, on and approached two neighbors for help, claiming she'd been raped and beaten. How evil do you have to be to want to chain someone up like that? Hey, the guy that did that to her was a spirit created for vengeance by the Most High to enact judgments on that woman for wickedness she committed in this life or in a past life. Thankfully, the woman was able to get loose and run for help, because she would have almost certainly died otherwise. And she, given all the circumstances she went through, she still got out of it with her life. That's not going to be the case for the majority of you women out here. Weak and frail, with a metal collar around her neck, the woman ran to the doors of multiple neighbors, begging for help, as her voice was nothing more than a slight whisper. Lisa Johnson, who lives in the neighborhood, spotted the about 100-pound woman covered with bruises as she struggled to crawl up her porch steps on Friday. She didn't have much of a voice, Johnson told KSHB News. It was more of a light "help me" than anything. Sadly, this is not an isolated incident. Today, there are more than 900,000 registered sex offenders in the United States, and those are just the ones that have been caught. How many more are there that have not been caught? And many more that are going to be raised up as spirits created for vengeance. But that's it with this first article. And I'll show you the title of it in case you want to look it up. And it's on endoftheamericandream.com. But now I'm going to go to my second article on apnews.com titled "Violent Week, a Grim Sign as Targeted Killings of Police Rise." Hey, so not only is lawlessness and the defunding of the police and a lot of police leaving the force leading to more people committing acts of violence and crime against each other out here, People are even starting to attack the few police that are still on the force out here in targeted killings and assaults. It's literally becoming a free-for-all out here. And this is just going to cause more police just to leave the force, which is just going to further exacerbate the horrific conditions out here. And it's also a part of biblical prophecy that people would regard the authorities. This is 2 Esdras chapter 15, verse 16 in the Apocrypha. For there shall be sedition among men. And when you look up the definition for the word sedition, it means conduct or speech inciting rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch. And you've got a bunch of different pundits out here saying that a second civil war is coming to the U.S. You had Bill Gates say that, and there will be civil unrest in the U.S. where people that are sick of the government and the policies that they're enacting, that it's not for their best interest, just going out and attacking political violence, further adding on to the regular violent crimes taking place out here and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. And your modern day kings and princes are these people in the government, mayors, senators, governors, presidents, and prime ministers, as well as the authorities that uphold the system, like the police or the military. And as we'll see in that article, there's a rise in targeted killings of police out here, them not regarding their kings nor princes, the authorities. And may have been about a year ago, I did a video on an article showing that with each successive year, threats of violence towards people in the government has been steadily increasing. And it's going to go from lip service to actual hand service out here, with people laying hands on these politicians and other people in positions of power in government. And the course of their actions shall stand in their power. Again, on apnews.com, violent week, a grim sign as targeted killings of police rise. The shooting deaths of 2 Connecticut officers and wounding of a third punctuated an especially violent week for police across the U.S. and fit into a grim pattern, even as more officers left their jobs in the past 2 years, iniquity, lawlessness abounding. The number targeted and killed rose. They shall not regard their kings nor princes. The love of many shall wax cold. According to organizations that track violence against police, 56 officers have been killed by gunfire this year, 14% more than this time last year, and about 45% ahead of 2020's pace. The country is on track for the deadliest year since 67 officers were killed in 2016. While the figures include a few officers killed by accidental gunfire, the number of ambushes in which police were injured or killed in surprise attacks with little chance to defend themselves has soared since 2020 and accounts for nearly half the officers killed this year. Such an attack apparently struck Wednesday in Bristol, Connecticut, where the state police said Bristol Police Sergeant Dustin DeMonte and Officer Alex Hamsey were killed, and Officers Alec Arato was wounded when they responded to a 911 call that appears to have been a deliberate act to lure law enforcement to the scene. At least 11 police officers were shot around the country this week, including one fatally in Greenville, Mississippi, and another in Las Vegas. Those are really scary numbers for law enforcement, not just for individual officers, but for the organizations they work for, which have to be taking this into account as they're hiring, retaining, and training officers, said Bill Alexander, Executive Director of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, which tracks officer deaths in the line of duty. It's not lost on the officers that the job they signed up for has become more dangerous, he said. That has to be taking a significant mental toll on the agencies at large and the individual officers doing the work. An off-duty officer was among 5 people killed in a shooting rampage by a 15-year-old boy in Raleigh in North Carolina on Thursday evening, but it wasn't clear if the officer was targeted. In late June, a man in the Appalachian foothills of eastern Kentucky opened fire on officers serving a warrant in a domestic violence case, killing 3 and wounding 5 others, a scene that deputies called pure hell. The Fraternal Order of Police reported that through September 30th of this year, there had been 63 ambush-style attacks in which officers were wounded, with 93 officers shot, 24 fatally. That's a lower number of such attacks than the first 9 months of 2021, when there were 75 ambushes of officers, with 93 shot and 21 killed. The total number of the ambushes in which police were hurt last year more than doubled from 2020. The increase in ambushes and killings of police comes at a time when many departments around the country face staffing shortages, with some agencies down hundreds of officers and struggling to fill vacancies. The C-19 has been the biggest killer of police officers in the past few years, with 280 deaths in 2020, 467 in 2021, and 64 so far this year, the Officer Down Memorial page reports. But many officers have retired early or resigned out of frustration with what they see as sagging public support amid defund the police efforts prompted by the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis officer and the deaths of other so-called black people, really Israelites, at the hand of law enforcement. The number of officers nationally fell from roughly 719,000 in 2020 to 688,000 in 2021, according to data reported to the FBI. Hiring of officers has rebounded some this year, but resignations and retirements continue to prove a challenge for departments around the country. The Washington, D.C.-based Police Executive Research Forum found in a survey earlier this year, because iniquity shall abound, because lawlessness shall abound, in violation of it, in contempt of it, in ignoring the law. No officers out here to enforce it. Mike Zorro is the police chief in Lakewood, Washington, a city of about 60,000 people, where 4 officers were assassinated at a coffee shop in 2009. He was the assistant chief at the time, and he said the department continues to see officers retiring early due to anxiety and stress that can be traced back to the attack. I started back in the early 90s, and back then and for a long time, you just sucked it up and moved on whenever you dealt with any trauma related to the job, whether it was someone else's or your own, Zorro said. After 2009, something of that magnitude, we recognized we had to try and do something different. We worked on the fly to develop methods of encouraging people to seek help. Eventually, it became ingrained in what we do. Today, it's called officer wellness. Almost done with the article. Zorro recalls how crucial the support of the community was in helping the department get through the aftermath of the killings. Such support, he said, is instrumental in helping officers accept the risks they face. Many law enforcement supporters worry about whether departments still have such backing, given the tenor of the national discourse around policing. They stress that questionable or illegal uses of force by officers are the rare exception, not the rule, but police have lost trust from many people, outraged at repeatedly seeing cell phone or body camera videos online of officers abusing their power. It would be infinitely harder to accept those risks and deal with the loss if the community is either suggesting the officers deserved it They shall not regard their kings nor princes, or making excuses for the person who committed the crime, or just not supporting them, Zara said. It's more imperative now to make that part of the conversation, given the lashing out at police we've seen nationwide over the last couple of years. And so as we can see, as we get closer and closer to Jacob's trouble breaking loose and all hell and mayhem and madness on the streets of America, nobody's safe out here. Men, women, children, young, old, Salakia, and even police officers. And it's only going to intensify and continue. We're living in the great times of judgment from Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai on you people on this planet, especially in the United States of America, for all the wickedness you've been committing. So that's it with this Shabbat lesson. And with this Shabbat lesson, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. As we can clearly see, these biblical prophecies are coming to their fulfillment as we speak, and we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shabbat Shalom.